Good morning, everyone. You know, last month in December, as I'm approaching the new year, I saw a picture of my grandparents, my dad's parents, and it gave me a thought about the first group of Japanese nationals to have come to America and how their arrival eventually allowed for me to come into being. This reflection brought back wonderful thoughts about my dad's parents, my grandparents. And in the Japanese language, grandfather is known as Ji-chan, and grandmother is known as Ba-chan. And if Ji-chan and Ba-chan were alive today, they would be 127 and 116 years old. Although they have been gone for over 36 and 47 years, seeing those pictures and thinking about my time with them brought back some really wonderful memories. I just wanted to digress a little bit at this point and wanted to tell you that over 50 years ago, in the early 60s, my parents would drop me off in the little town of Walnut Grove, and I would be staying with my grandparents, Ji-chan and Ba-chan, for 1 week. And during that 1 week, my grandmother never spoke English. My grandfather, who was in his early 70s, was a gardener, and he would be doing his gardening work down the river, Sacramento River. And so I would spend all my time with Ba-chan, grandmother, and with her friends, and not knowing what the heck they're saying. And there were no kids my age in that little town of Walnut Grove. And so after the week was over, I thought to myself, why am I here for 1 week? Why do I have to be here and not my sister, Naomi? And so I really didn't appreciate my time with them. But years later, when I think about it, that was my special moment with them. And I kind of blew it because I really didn't appreciate my time with them. And so I regret how I approach my thoughts about being with Ji-chan and Ba-chan. And so what I would say to all of you who still have grandparents alive is to, each and every moment that you're with them, enjoy their time, because you don't know how long you're going to have with them. And even throw them a curveball. Give them a hug and say, I love you. And you might be pleasantly surprised at the reaction you get from your Ji-chan and Ba-chan. And so, going on with my message, Ji-chan and Ba-chan, my grandparents, were known as part of that group called the Issei, the first generation Japanese nationals to immigrate to America in the early 1900s. Although my knowledge is very limited, my message is about the Isseis, my unsung heroes, pioneers whom we, the Nisseis, second generation, Senseis, which I'm a part of, the third generation, Yonsei, fourth generation, and Gosei, fifth generation, owe our existence to them. And also how and what role Jodo Shinshu Buddhism played in their lives in America. With the end of the 260-year Tokugawa government in Japan in the mid-1800s, due to the opening of the country to foreign powers, the Meiji government, named after the emperor, was formed. Initially, the Japanese government made the decision to send students and laborers to America to learn and bring that knowledge and experience back to Japan to allow the nation to grow into a strong, modern economic country. During the early Meiji period, Japan experienced very turbulent economic times involving significant unemployment and bankruptcies resulting in civil disorder. In order to alleviate those problems, the Japanese government allowed the working class men to immigrate to Hawaii and North and South America to begin new lives. The immigrants in North America found menial employment in agriculture, mining, and railroad construction. The work was brutal, hours long and exhausting, and pay minimal. The housing was primitive and meager. With no religious foundation to guide these early immigrants on how to live meaningful lives, many turned to drinking, gambling, and other social vices to cope with the harsh realities of living in a new country. The Isseis faced racial prejudice from the very beginning. White America viewed the Isseis as crude, ill-educated, and wanted to remove them from America, as Americans feared the loss of their jobs due to the threat of the Issei presence. In response to the plight of the Isseis, the Honganji in Japan sent ministers to America in the early 1900s to help the Isseis cope with the harshness of life. The goal was to stabilize their lives by instilling a sense of humility, duty, honor, and responsibility in the Isseis. In addition, Japanese women were allowed to come to America to be united with their Issei husbands in order to begin productive new lives. The ministers worked with the Isseis to help them adjust and adapt in the new world so that they could carve out a decent life despite the constant verbal and physical threats of racial discrimination. Encouraged with the Buddhist teaching of wisdom, which is the understanding that life is impermanent and constantly changing, and compassion, which is the human life's connection with other human beings and all things in the oneness of life. Isseis dedicated their lives to living a life of gratitude so that they could make the most of the limited opportunities available to them. Buddhist temples, auxiliary halls, and classrooms were built to provide study centers, meeting places, and Sunday schools for Issei families to come together and flourish as a community. Ministers were instrumental in establishing Buddhist educational centers and English language classes, as well as helping to establish clubs and organizations such as the Buddhist Women's Association, commonly known as Fujinkai, Junior Young Buddhist Association, Young Buddhist Association, and Adult Buddhist Association. Within this environment, Issei families were able to channel their energies and efforts to educate themselves and acquire various skills for jobs in the workforce. Buddhism influenced the Isseis to continue observing Japanese culture and way of life, such as leaving their shoes outside the house before entering, celebrating boys' and girls' days, growing, making, and eating Japanese food, staples, and delicacies, speaking the Japanese language, and listening and dancing to Japanese music, including obondori, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, with the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt issued the now infamous and unconstitutional Executive Office 9066 in February 1942. As a result, all persons of Japanese ancestry were corralled and removed from designated restricted military zones on the west coast of the United States. Approximately 120,000 Isseis and Nisseis, the second-generation Japanese Americans born to the Isseis, were moved to 14 assembly centers where they were to stay through the spring and summer of 1942. Sadly, they pretty much lost everything. One figure reported to total approximately $400 million. In the fall, the Isseis and Nisseis were transferred by train to permanent relocation detention centers or internment camps located in the most despicable and isolated areas within the United States. Their new homes were barrack-style houses surrounded by barbed wire and guards with machine guns mounted on security towers. To add insult to injury, the United States government wrongfully suspended the internees' due right to process, where personal rights, liberties, and freedom disappeared for approximately 3 years. Within the confines of these internment camps, internees look towards Buddhism to help them bring order to chaos and meaning to this senseless situation. Buddhist services brought solace to the internees in helping them to cope with their mental and physical sufferings. Other Buddhist teachings of appreciation and respect for life, compassion, patience, perseverance, and mindfulness of thoughts, words, and actions help the Isseis to endure the unbearable. It was that gaman spirit that allowed them to continue living and not give up in order to survive those horrible internment camp experiences and maintain their dignity in America. After the war, the Isseis, continued to be hardworking and law-abiding citizens, always devoted to family and community. It was the Buddhist religion that strengthened the family relations and the moral values for the Isseis so that life could be more tolerable for them, and in turn created opportunities for their families and generations to follow to improve and enrich their lives. Each succeeding generation experiencing better lives than the previous generation so that they collectively could contribute positively to the human experience and the American way of life. Please join me in Gassho. Although the Issei generation is no longer around, they will always exist within us through our parents, generations connected to each other. Let us never forget our appreciation for all that the Isseis had to endure in order to contribute to our well-being and the well-being of future generations so that all of us could live better lives in America. To those Isseis and Buddhist ministers who helped those Isseis survive and live productive lives, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you for everything you did for the sake of all of us. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.